Jurassic Park, the world's greatest theme park or the world's greatest logistical nightmare? Today on Thought Experiment, we are going to take a look at Jurassic Park and see, could it ever be made to work in real life? Jurassic Park creates an amazing idea of a place where dinosaurs are brought back to life through the magic of science, and the public can go and view those dinosaurs in a beautiful park setting. The greatest theme park in the entire world, with living biological attractions so astounding that they will drive everyone out of their minds. Well, it's a beautiful dream, but the fact of the matter is that Jurassic Park simply could never function. And not just because of the frog DNA or the dinosaurs breeding in the wild. No, the very idea of the park is fundamentally flawed. Jurassic Park has three major issues: the animals, the park systems, and the very location. And these are not small issues to be waved aside. Automation is amazing, and you can do a lot with automation. But when it comes to park systems, it's not as good as it might sound. Mr. Hammond says that he had spared no expense, but the fact is the InGen company cut corners everywhere they could. And the fact is that in a place like Jurassic Park, you would never be able to automate so thoroughly that you would be able to cut out humans entirely. Because in addition to all of the geneticists, all of the security people, and all the scientists, and all the rest of the people that work at Jurassic Park, there's also an infinite supply of small job workers, people backstage, people that you don't think about but who play an important role, like security, and lifeguards, and pool boys, and desk clerks, and managers, and technical systems, and transport people. I consider that Disney's Animal Kingdom at the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando is a good analog for Jurassic Park, in that it is both a major theme park and a major zoo. Well, in order to run the Animal Kingdom, you need 18,000 workers to keep the park running around the clock. That gives you an idea as to the scale of an ambition that you are attempting here. This is not a small number of people. In fact, that is a very considerable number of people. And one of the big issues that you're going to run into is how exactly do you house all of those people? Because you'd either have to bring them in from the mainland every day, which canonically was 120 miles from Isla Nublar, or you'd have to bring them in and put them up somewhere like a worker village, which again, canonically, they had at Isla Sorna, which was 80 miles from Isla Nublar. In either case, you would have to bring in these workers every single day, which is canonically very difficult to do. Isla Nublar is said to have wind shears around the island, which makes flying difficult. And it is also established in both the book and the movie that the seas can be quite heavy around both Isla Sorna and Isla Nublar, making travel by ship difficult also. One thing that you might consider doing is putting up your own airport. And this idea is not without merit. As a matter of fact, the US government has done something very similar to this for Area 51. Every day, 6 Boeing 737-600 series depart from the Las Vegas airport and transport the workers 83 miles to Area 51. This is a good equivalent in terms of distance of Isla Sorna to Isla Nublar. However, for Jurassic Park, more than 6 airlines would be needed because there are substantially more workers at Jurassic Park. Moreover, if you're bringing in workers to build park systems, you're going to need people who are specialized in that area to come and work, which requires work visas, and also would require them to be on a contractual basis to come to the island. That's a difficult sell, because you would have to schedule it similar to a cruise ship, where you might be on Isla Nublar for up to 6 or 7 months, get a brief break at home, and then you come back to the island again. That's a difficult sell, particularly given the fact that in Jurassic World it's established that cell phone signal on the island is difficult to obtain, and so communication with your family may become quite an issue. And if you're bringing people in from the mainland every day, then you might want to provide a high-speed ferry. But even a high-speed ferry would require a minimum of 4 hours to travel the 120 nautical miles to get to the island, which would mean you'd need a fleet of them running back to back in order to transport all the workers, let alone the guests. One thing that's important to remember also is that these workers would be present around the clock, both day and night. Even when the park is closed, they would be out in the park performing maintenance, doing security checks, and attending to guest services at the resorts. So, in other words, in order to run Jurassic Park, you need to have a workforce of people around the clock who are willing and able to deal with the issues that all of the major theme parks and the major zoos have. Transport is not only a problem for workers, but also for guests. To get to Jurassic Park from anywhere in the world, you would require at least one international flight. Just for fun, I calculated how long it would take for Zach and Gray, the two boys from Jurassic World, to arrive at Isla Nublar. We will assume that they are from somewhere up north, because at the beginning of Jurassic World it's quite cold. And let's just say Chicago. Based on my research, it would take them 14 hours and 5 minutes, not including time at the airport, going through customs and in terminals, etc., and would cost their parents $1,988 each, plus tax, to get them there. That is a very substantial cost, and not one that most people would be able to endorse. Consider also that the majority of the main park investors are either Japanese or Americans, and that for them, they would have to travel quite substantially halfway around the world to visit this park. Peter Ludlow was correct when he said, you don't bring people halfway around the world to visit a zoo, you bring the zoo to them. And really, John Hammond should have considered building in Orlando, even given all of the legal restrictions he would have faced from the American government. Because in order to arrive in Costa Rica and spend any particular time there, guests would have to travel for hours in order to be able to arrive at Jurassic Park. And of course, once they do arrive, then you have all the problems that you would expect from a major theme park or resort. There are people who are eating too much, people who are getting drunk, people who need medical services for their heart conditions, people who want fresh towels brought up to their rooms. And you, as the park managers, are going to have to deal with that. It's not an easy prospect considering that you're on an island removed from the mainland. And of course, it is the island itself that poses one of the largest difficulties, because in order to get anything to or from Isla Nublar, you would have to transport it from the mainland. Now, in the book, it specifically says that they have a supply ship that runs every 2 weeks to the island to bring them all the food and supplies that they need. That is nowhere near sufficient for what they would actually require. You would need an entire chain of supply ships running constantly in order to be able to supply not only the park and the people that stay there, but also the animals. The animals themselves pose the largest problems, both metaphorically and literally. Even if you managed to get the DNA completely right, even if there was no outside breeding or assets out of containment, the animals would still create tremendous problems for the park management. Because the animals require a certain amount of space in order to be able to be happy and productive, and to not attempt to escape all the time and eat the tourists. And the plain fact is that Jurassic Park simply does not have sufficient space to handle live dinosaurs. Canonically, the movies tell us that Isla Nublar is 33 square miles in size, which is quite substantial. That's a pretty big island, but it's nowhere near big enough. Comparing once again to Disney's Animal Kingdom, which is 580 acres in size, Jurassic Park would be enormous. It's 36 times the size at 21,120 acres. However, that is still not sufficient, because the home range of a tyrannosaur, for example, might be hundreds or even thousands of square miles. Consider the polar bear, which is the largest land predator in the world today. Polar bears in captivity require an enclosure that's 2 acres in size minimum, while a tyrannosaur is 70 times larger than a polar bear and would require an enclosure that's 140 acres in size, or roughly 1/4 square mile for one tyrannosaur. One thing that is interesting to note is that asset containment actually would be the least of the concerns, because dinosaurs are effectively just very big animals, and the mentalities that are used in various zoos around the world would also be applicable to dinosaurs. In the book, it describes having a concrete moat that is water-filled, and then the electric fences around the perimeter. Now, in both the book and the movie, the electric fence proves to be quite a problem when the power goes out, which it should never do, since Jurassic Park would be able to generate power through both biodiesel, solar, geothermal, and wind, so there would be a great many redundancies on this power grid. However, building an enclosure for a dinosaur would not be particularly difficult, as long as you were able to get the correct size requirements and to build the fences with sufficient strength to prevent the dinosaurs from breaking through them. Now, the biggest problem that you would run into in Jurassic Park would be the issue of food. Because in neither the book nor the movie do they address the problems that you would face when it comes to feeding dinosaurs. In zoos all around the world, animals like rhinos and elephants will completely strip their enclosure of vegetation, regardless of how much hay or feed you bring in, because they feed constantly. And presumably this would also be true of an animal like a dinosaur with a fast metabolism. A single brachiosaurus, for example, would be able to eat 888 pounds of plant matter every single day. A tyrannosaur would require 400 pounds of meat a day, which would be roughly the equivalent of a quarter cow. Spinosaurus, if we assume they had a metabolism more like a modern crocodile, would require over a ton of fish a week to keep it happy. The point is, this is a lot of food, and it's a lot more than a single supply ship would be able to process every 2 weeks. There is, of course, also the concern of the food on the other end, because what goes in must also come out. Waste disposal would be a tremendous problem at Jurassic Park, because every day a single brachiosaur would be able to poop about 800 pounds, or 3,000 pounds in a single sitting, depending on how frequently they were able to go. A tyrannosaur would be able to produce spore that was 24 inches long and weigh 45 pounds. And if you think that you have a terrible job, just imagine being the poor person who has to go into the Rex enclosure and scoop up 50-pound dino turds with a shovel while a tyrannosaur is wandering around. During the dinosaur times, there were organisms that were specifically evolved to eat dinosaur spore. But unfortunately, those organisms are no longer part of the Earth's ecosystem, because when the dinosaurs died off, so did their food source. So there is no dung beetle in the world today that would be capable of handling dino turds. So in order to be able to remove that much dinosaur waste, you would have to either burn it, or you'd be able to add it to a biodiesel generator and burn the methane gas that is produced to power your turbines for the electrical grid for your park. The long and the short of it is that Jurassic Park, though a beautiful idea and probably would be an amazing theme park, would never, ever work in the real world. It is simply an unfeasible idea, even if the dinosaurs never escape. Even if everything goes the way you expect, it will still fail. Thank you so much for watching. If you have an idea for a thought experiment that you'd like us to overanalyze, leave it in the comments. If you'd like to see more of our content, feel free to subscribe. And if you really want to help out the channel, you can also ring that bell, and that will notify you about any updates that we may have in the future. Until next time, keep your eyes and mind open and stay creative.